Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a family drama disguised as a dystopian, and that book is Greenwood by Michael Christie. This was a book that was recommended to me by some friends in real life, and they all read it and had great things to say about it, and so they really sold it to me, and I read it, and unfortunately for me, I didn't enjoy it as much as they did. Most of them, I think, gave it all like 5 stars and just loved it and talked about how beautiful it was and how they adored it and how it made them cry and all of these things, and unfortunately, I think a lot of those emotional, impactful moments didn't land for me the same way it did for them. I ended up giving this a 3-star book, which means I liked it. I did think it was good. It just didn't hit those highs for me that I would like to get out of a book that I would give a higher ranking to. Now, I mentioned that this book is a family drama disguised as a dystopian, and that has to do with what this book is about. So this book, we are introduced to our main, well, not our main character, but one of our main characters, Jake Greenwood, and she is living in the year 2034 in a world where a blight has destroyed pretty much all of the trees and a lot of the vegetation on Earth. And so there are these pockets of forests that are still alive, mostly in northern regions of the world, and she is working on one called Greenwood Island. And like I said, this is an old growth forest. It's extremely valuable in today's money, and basically famous people, rich people come and tour it and enjoy the island and everything. Now, that is the dystopian part of this, and the family drama of this is in the year 2034. And basically some information is given to Jake Greenwood that she might actually be the rightful heir to the island she is working on. And what happens is this story changes directions completely and it starts going backwards in time. So we start in 2034, then we go to 2008, and then we go to 1974, and then we go to 1934. And so you can see we go backwards in time. And what we're doing in that is we are following her family line backwards. And so in 2008, you see her dad, Liam Greenwood, and you see the things he's dealing with because of his mother, who is in the 1974 timeline, and we get things from her perspective. And then we see the things she is dealing with because of the 1934 timeline and the things that happened to them, and how all these things trickle up to the current day, and how things that happened in 1934 are still affecting the Greenwoods in 2034. So I think that's a really brilliant structure to the story. It is something that I did find pretty fascinating. Now, with that being the main plot of this story, this book is very reliant on characters. And so if you are a character reader, I think this is a book that might really connect with you. If you are very, very character-centric and character-focused, and you really get attached to characters, and you like to see large parts of their life and like decisions they make and why they make them, and the things that have affected them throughout their life, this is going to be a book that I think really lands home for you. Unfortunately, it didn't for me, but like I said, I think for a lot of people, it really will. Now, what I like to do in these reviews is quickly talk about prose, plot, and then characters. So quickly with prose, I always like to say it's either a neutral, a negative, or a positive. Here in this book, I think it's pretty neutral. This isn't a book with prose that is going to make you have to use 110% of your brain power, but it is not, negative anyway. It's not distracting from the story. If anything, it's fine. It's kind of a Sanderson-esque, where, he wants you to look through the window, not pay attention to the window, I think is how he describes it. That's kind of how the prose is here in this book. Now, for the plot, I kind of already explained it to you. We're going back, and the main thread is that Jake Greenwood might be the rightful heir to Greenwood Island, and we're going back in time to 1934, where the story starts with Everett and Harris Greenwood, who end up creating one of the largest timber, conglomerates in Canada, and then how that trickles up and affects things throughout their story, right? And so that's a plot, and I mean that is it. Obviously there are reveals and there are subplots inside of those stories of the year, but the main thing that this book talks about is characters. And so I'm going to quickly start at 1934 and kind of work my way up, give you some thoughts about the characters and what I think was good about each individual one, right? So we're going to start in 1934 because that's, while that is the last timeline we get to me, I think it's the one we probably spend the most time with, and easily to me, it is the most interesting one. By far and away, these are the two characters that I was easily attached to the most. They go through a lot. So these two kids come from nothing. They grow up basically in the woods and start a timber company from scratch. There are some big twists and reveals from them, but I don't want to spoil that for you. Just to give you the basic premise though, from them, a giant timber company, Greenwood Timber, ends up happening. Now, there are all kinds of things that happen from the time they're a child to the time they're adults. And that's the beauty of this story, really, is that you get that growth. I hear about in stories that people really enjoy going from when a character is a child, and sometimes this takes many books, but all the way to adulthood or to the end of their life. And you get that in these small snippets, not small snippets, but in this one section, this 1934 section of the book, you get that. You get to see the struggles that characters have, and it's brilliant. World wars are mixed into this. Business deals are mixed with this. Famous historical characters like Rockefeller are mixed into this. And also social problems of the time are mixed into this. Obviously, it's, happening in 1934, into adulthood, so you could say into the 50s. So things like homosexuality are tackled and shown, what it was like in that time and things like that. And it's brilliantly done. And you feel for both of these characters throughout. And you also get to see the trauma they cause going forward. And so you get to see why, so moving forward into 1974, you get to see why Willow Greenwood acts the way she does. So you go from Everett and Harris, who are these timber tycoons, right? And then you go to her, and she is, basically an advocate. She is I guess you would consider her to be, environmental activist, hippie. She lives in a commune. She is actively going and destroying timbering equipment. Basically, she's trying to atone for the sins of her father, right? By going and being an activist and, tearing machines apart and protesting and all of these things. And you see that resentment that she has for the things that the people before her have done, right? Well, then we get to the 2008 timeline, which is her son, Liam, and you see basically a reversal, right? She loved trees and pushed all of these things on him so hard, made him live a very unconventional life growing up. And we get to Liam, and I don't want to say to spite her, but to kind of spite her, he ends up becoming a carpenter. And the disgust that this causes his mother is honestly kind of hilarious. But you can also see how her being so harsh and living the way that they did influenced him to kind of take that path, to kind of stick it to his mom in the end. And obviously both of those characters have their own trials and tribulations, not to the same extent that we get from Harris and Everett, but like I said, those two are the main bulk of this story, and it is so well done. These other characters are actually part of the weaker bits of this book for me. They're the parts that I didn't quite connect with as much, especially Willow. Unfortunately, I understood everything that she was doing. That didn't mean I didn't find her extremely frustrating. Same Liam, I found him to be extremely frustrating, and Jake, I found also to be extremely frustrating in a couple of different situations. But that's besides the point. I know not everyone felt that way. Like I said, most of the people I know who read this absolutely loved them, thought it was great. For me, I thought those were weaker. But then, we get back to 2034, and we see once again how things have affected Jake and all these decisions, and there is a lot of mystery that I have not talked about here. I have kept this still very spoiler free. You can go into this reading and still have no real idea the impact that a lot of things that are going to happen going all the way back to 1934 are going to have on you, and I highly implore you to do, because like I said, if you are a character first reader, I really think you're going to connect with these characters, and you're really going to feel just like you're with them and like their whole life, and that these are like old friends, especially Harris and Everett, that you just feel for. And in talking about this book with some of the people I know who read it, while I was expressing some of my frustrations, one of them just pointed out that, some of the things that happen in this are because life really is messy. There are so many books where everything would be wrapped up with like a perfect bow and everything would make logical sense. And I think that is part of the problem I do have with this book, is there's a logic part of my brain that is just upset with some of the decisions, and I really think that knocks it for me. But for her, she was talking about how it just makes more sense. Life is messy. People don't always make logical decisions. They make emotional, rash decisions that you, like in hindsight, maybe you wouldn't do, but because it's not so straightforward, you're not out, they aren't outside of the situation like I am, where I could make a real, rational, logical, thing happen, at least in my mind. To them, it's an emotional response, and it's messy, and it's family, and it's history, and it's all of these things that I think a lot of people really resonate and connect with. So this is one of those books that I really would recommend to a lot of people, even though it didn't necessarily strike home for me as much as it did for others. I think it has a lot of value in it, and I think you do get a lot out of this story. For it not being a very long book, I do think it has a lot to offer, and it gives a lot. So just quickly in closing again, while this book wasn't a home run for me, I do think it will be very strong for a lot of other people. Like I said, most of the people I know who have read it absolutely adore this book. And so I'm going to really recommend it to you to at least consider putting it onto your TBR. Let me know if you're thinking about reading it. If you have read it, I'd love to know what your thoughts, what characters you liked, what characters you didn't like, all those things. I obviously left a lot out of here to be spoiler free. There's so much more for you to consume and get out of this book if you do decide to pick it up, which once again, I do implore you to do if you're a character focused reader. Let me know anything else below in the comments. And as always, have a good one.